Hello, my name is Ed. I'm going to talk to you about GraphQL in Perl 5, the story so far. So, before we go on, because we've been told not to use copyrighted material here, there's nothing with copyright in the presentation. However, you may recognize certain references or allusions to a popular movie series. And that's okay, because they can't copyright your imagination. You just have to imagine any sort of pictures that might have gone in there. So moving on. So I'm going to talk to you about GraphQL, what that is, rather than the specific Perl 5 bit, and why, what's now available, lessons I've learned doing it, what's still to come, and then some resources which you'll also be able to get afterwards off the webs. So what it is. Okay, so a question that I've been asked, as I've told people, largely JavaScript people, I said, oh, yeah, what are you up to? Oh, I'm porting GraphQL to Perl 5. And they say, why? And at the time, I just thought, well, one, it's a brilliant adventure. And two, I've got an even better answer now, which is D by X class, because you don't have that, as far as I know, or anything like it in many other languages. So just free access to really any database, thanks to the amazing efforts of the DVD folks. So I'm also going to tell you about REST, and compared to that, and GraphQL, and New Hope. So, what do I mean by attack of the request? Well, so REST, there's pros and cons, naturally. The pros include that it's very simple. You, as quick show of hands, who has used REST as a programmer? Anyone not? All right, we'll keep this short then. Good. Okay, so as we know, you've got endpoints. You might have users /2. And that's a very simple thing. And you have users 2 and then a sub-resource and so on. That's pretty simple. You know what you're getting. And it's consistent. If you want to get a user with ID 2, you just do that. The cons, there are some. It's not fully rigorous. You don't necessarily know exactly what you're going to get. There is OpenAPI. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So that does sort of tighten things up a little bit. It's not what you call a full, proper type system per se. And in foreseeable cases, let's say, okay, you've got a user, you want to get their favorite books, and you want to get, for those books, you want to get, let's say, title and ISBN. And then another time, you want to get, say, the title and the author. And there's not a very consistent way of requesting just those bits. So you might be doing a lot more network traffic, and also you might have to keep going back to get each individual sub-resource. So that can take a lot of time, etc. So, GraphQL, a new hope. So, it's been described. I tried to get a source for this to sort of make it look even more credible and so on, but I just couldn't find it. So maybe I've misremembered the exact wording. But it's been described as a type system with a query language attached, which I fully agree with. When you use it, you make a request for exactly the data that you want. I'm not going to go too much into exactly the details of GraphQL, but take my word for it. There are plenty of resources online to see this as well. When you make a request, you can get back every single piece of information that you need to fulfill your current requirement, and without any wasted traffic at all. It saves time because you get all that in one go. As we know, when you're requesting things from an API, your big problem that you have is latency. So this, clearly, by eliminating round trips, improves that picture. An additional bit of benefit is that that query that you're putting in to the server can be assembled from little bits called fragments, and that can be generated for you by front-end code, particularly Relay. I'll make another reference to that later on, which is a library made by Facebook. There's a sort of competitor made by Apollo. I haven't looked into those in great detail yet, but for sure, you can just tell your little front-end components, yeah, I need to know about users, and I need to know this thing from users. And it will just work. It'll just happen. It'll be assembled for you. So it saves effort. Also saves making mistakes and iterating, so it's lots of win. And another benefit you get with GraphQL, you can see here, is tools. Because it's very rigorously specified, you know when you make a request, the system that you're talking to will be able to reveal to you, if you ask it, thanks to the introspection queries, exactly what it's got. So there's a brilliant tool called GraphQL. You can see a slide from there. You'll see this slide again in a little bit as a special example, but you can see there, so you can make, say, a query and a mutation, and the available mutations it'll just offer. You can also use control space in the GraphQL tool, and it'll just give you the complete list, which is very handy. So what we've made so far in Perl 5. I'll talk to you now about the Sipan modules and some sample applets. Now, Sipan modules, there's the heart of it. This is a set of modules that implements a query parser, a type system, and executing queries. So you get a query in, it'll parse it up, and then basically apply it to the types that you have, and obviously the backend information that you want to give back. Put it together, validate it all both ways, validate the query, validate the data that comes back, and then, if all is good, give back the results. And there's also a structure for, so what you get back is a JSON object which has got some keys of data and errors, if there are any. It's all fairly structured. Now, this module here, quick show of hands, who's used SQL Translator? Okay, and so this is a, thank you, this is a producer, obviously, of GraphQL. If you give it an SQL Translator schema, it will produce a GraphQL schema. And that's what it does. This actually uses a plugin that we'll get to in a second, the plugin convert system. And we'll produce that. Now, that's not very sophisticated yet because it's just using the SQL Translator stuff. And it can be a bit naive. It's going to shortly get hooked up to the DBX class schema loader, and that will make it produce sort of better looking types and so on. Here we go. So we've got two plugins here for two popular web frameworks. We've also got two plugin converts, as I called it. Now, a key point about these two things there. The first one, the DBIC one, actually works. The slide that you saw there was actually, there's a sample app, which I'll come to shortly, that's got, it was just supplied basically more as a demonstration of Mojo and Mojolicious and how to sort of do that in a best practice way. But it does feature a DBIC schema and data and so on. So I hooked that up. That's the sample data that I used for the development of this. And it just works. You can do mutations and so on. Now, the OpenAPI one is still getting there. You can generate a schema. So I've released version 0.01. It doesn't have functioning queries yet, but it will very soon. I found a bug in the OpenAPI client yesterday. Otherwise, I would have been able to make an actual somewhat working version for today, but it'll be there next week. Okay, so, and these are links to those, which again is more for convenience if you look at the slides. Now, the sample applets, we've got one from Mojolicious. These are all repos. There's a GraphQL Perl organization. It's on GitHub, and there are various repos on there, including two samples, which is Mojolicious and Response 2. This one is under my GitHub account because it's not sort of fully there yet. It's still a work in progress. When it is there, it'll then become a proper GraphQL Perl sample app, and that'll be what I use for the React Relay thing, which you'll see a reference to a little bit later. There's also a tutorial, which is not really a sample applet, but the GraphQL.js on graphql.org has a tutorial. It's very good. It takes you about half an hour to run through it, and it's got code that you can cut and paste, and it'll teach you GraphQL in JavaScript. I have made a translation of that, of all the idioms in that, into the GraphQL Perl equivalent. There's a link to this again in the slides. I'm not going to expect you to memorize what that is now. which lets you then run through the GraphQL tutorial, but in Perl. So I'll quickly show you some sample code, see what it looks like. With the Mojolicious plugin, it's basically a demonstration of that. Now, you can see the highlighted bit there in white. It has the plugin, it says convert and test. Now, the thing about the plugin convert system, what I have made, is that you give it just a module, and then you can refer to it. You'll ask it for, so when you use it, you'll generally just be able to say, let's say convert. So here, also on the dance one you'll see in a second, you request which plugin convert you want, and then you'll notice the array ref there, any extra arguments you want to give it. Now the test one, as you might imagine, doesn't really take any arguments. It's just generates a single tiny little schema which has got one field in it, which is hello world. When you query that, you get back hello world. Another one, as we've seen in the previous slides, we've got a DBIC one. So you can just say convert DBIC and then give it, the argument for that is a code ref that returns a DBIX schema, and then it all just works from there. So you don't even have to sort of generate anything in between. You can just run up your Mojolicious or whatever every time. Just say convert this DBIC and it will just work. As you can see here, the Dance2 equivalent, the bits highlighted are the code that actually hooks up the plugin. And again, you can see it's got the convert convert plugin there. Now, we have here now, this is the sort of partly finished demonstration there. This actually has, as you can see there, the actual the use of the DBIC plugin. And here we have a screenshot from that again. Now basically there are 4 different result classes in this schema, as Tempire's example has. And so what it does is it creates, the plugin creates, does the CRUD, so create, read, update, delete, generates mutations for each of those, a create one, an update one, and a delete one, as you can see there. Obviously the read one is covered by the query, you can see up above. So there's all the links to that for convenience. So things that I have learned, so this has largely been a port of the GraphQL JS implementation. So when I got to the parser, it's a very imperative thing indeed. It's not it's not sort of very declarative at all. So I wanted to go in a different direction. So PegX is a module by Ingi. I found it very good indeed, very sort of declarative and so on. Another big lesson I've learned there is to use immutable data. So a thing that's very big in the GraphQL JS is that it uses immutable data objects in almost, but not quite, all instances. And it's got one thing that it has mutations in, which is to capture errors. And a thing that the GraphQL Perl now has is that mutation is got rid of. It's now also passed back as just data. I'll be feeding that back into the GraphQL JS very shortly, because it's a quite simple little change. So, still to do. Return of the Perl 5. So things that I need to do there. I've got a branch on the repo there, which is to do async. Again, this is relatively straightforward because I just get to port the logic they have there. It's straightforward. The difficulty that I've faced is that, as we know in Perl, there's at least 2 different ways of doing promises that are not entirely API compatible, because there's future, there's promises. So I'm going to have either 3 or 4 different code refs that you pass in as a little hash ref to, when you do execute, that will do the mapping for you, and then it'll be easy. And also you can use it in synchronous mode, which it currently is now. Another thing to do is to make the DBIC plugin support reload. Now, let's quickly talk about the post-GraphQL there. That's a module that you plug into your GraphQL JS, and it talks to a Postgres database. And specifically this supporting relay bit there, it means that the classes have a particular structure. So you've got a class called node, so a type called node, and then various little bits of an API there. that would be very straightforward for me to support, but just haven't got to that yet. Another thing there is to make a little tool that will just take other schemas, introspect those, and then just sellotape them all together, and just make all the types that are available, all the queries just get melded together, all the mutations all get melded together. Again, that's going to be pretty easy. And likewise, using the OpenAPI plugin that you've seen a reference to there, it'll be very straightforward to, especially, in fact, only if they've got an OpenAPI specification, just to generate a GraphQL thing from that and then federate that together. So these will all just be little tools, surprisingly small amounts of code and so on. And also, having got the bit that I mentioned there about getting relay support from the DBIC plugin, we'll also be able to make a sample app which will demonstrate this stuff. So another thing that I wanted to mention here is that the plugin system has, the design concept is it's a two-way thing. So there's a method, it basically supports two methods. There's the whichever plugin you have pointed to GraphQL, but then also for each of those, let's say DBIC and OpenAPI so far, a from GraphQL. So you could give that a schema, and it'll generate for you whatever the DBIC or OpenAPI or whatever equivalent would be. So what that would let you do is to take, actually just you write a schema, you start from the schema, in PostgreSQL land they call that schema first development, which just describes all the types and all the things that you want to do to them, all the queries, all the mutations. And then you give that there, and it could generate a DBIC class scheme, which, and then as we know with SQL Translator, can generate an actual database for you, and it will just work. And likewise, from that, you could also, subject to how far I get with the OpenAPI, you could also then generate a REST API just with no extra effort. So in summary, I've talked to you about all of these items here. I'm sure you all remember. Quick word about our sponsors. Perl Careers, on the top right there, have actually also sponsored the creation of GraphQL Perl. It's good for them. And none of this awesome stuff that you'll have heard about so far before this talk and afterwards would be possible without our sponsors. So finally, there's the resources there. Are there any questions?
So you mentioned the DBIC plugin does CRUD operations.
Yes.
Is there any sort of is there any way to call it a result object method, maybe, or something not just attributes changing?
So what you get back is all the mutations give back an output type. So then you just can query that as if it was a query.
Okay.
So what you could do, and a very typical thing to do, is to do create and then ask for the ID from that. That's a sort of very standard thing.
Could you define a Perl method on the result and then call that from your GraphQL client?
Not the GraphQL client. That would be basically it's a black box. You just get GraphQL to hook that sort of thing up. I know that you can define extra methods and so on in DBIC, because obviously it's a Perl module. I haven't really figured out a way to introspect that properly yet, because the problem is that typing the return.
Yeah, it doesn't really fit with GraphQL, does it?
Not quite. If you've got ideas on that, please raise an issue on the repo, just as a feature request. That'd be great. And then especially any ideas you've got about that, that'd be fantastic. For instance, return type or function parameters is a way to achieve that. So why not? Someone else? Someone else had a question? There are no stupid questions, but let's not test that. Go ahead. Go on.
Sorry, is the you probably touched on this, but does OpenAPI complement GraphQL, or are they two sort of conflicting standards?
They're both sort of things that deal in the same space, clearly, but basically, GraphQL has been described as the new REST, which I think I probably agree with. They sort of solve the same problem, which is to expose, set data and queries and mutations on it. They're sort of related-ish, but you can do sort of more with GraphQL. Does that answer your question?
So, yeah, stupid question. Is OpenAI only applicable to REST?
As far as I know, yes. It's basically the new name for Swagger.
Yeah, okay.
So it's just literally a specification of endpoints, REST endpoints, and the parameters that you can get, the different types of parameters, query parameters, JSON, parameters, etc.
So basically with GraphQL, you're going to be producing something similar to what you would have produced with OpenAPI.
Well, if you're using the convert,
GraphQL is also.
no, that's fine. I would encourage you to actually look at either the JavaScript or now the Perl tutorial. It takes about half an hour to do, literally. Half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour, and you'll get GraphQL. That's what I did this year. I went through the JavaScript one. It's like, oh, because you read all the stuff about it. It's like, okay, yeah, I just forget what I was talking about. But then you just do it, because the tutorial is very well put together by Facebook. And you'll just get it. And like, oh, okay. And then now you'll know about all the DBIC thing and the Open API one as well. The possibilities are amazing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I say, talk offline and get me later. Any others? Go ahead.
Is Facebook using GraphQL?
Oh, yes. Yes, I mean, they invented it for use. This problem that they were solving was to get... Sorry about this. Initially their mobile app was just a web view. And they thought, well, that's not the best thing. So then they thought, okay, well, how do we do APIs? All right, well, REST, apparently. And then there's the problem of one source of the truth, which is a problem that I'm sure we've all dealt with. Or do you make all the various different clients that you have, the web server, the mobile apps and so on, different mobile apps, all have to talk to these different endpoints here, and what if one changes, or then there's a big problem. So it was a way of doing what they call backend for front ends, and also, conversely, acts as a front end for back ends. So that's what that federating thing is about. One of the things that people are doing is they are getting a bunch of typically REST APIs and then just sort of self-saving them together into one exposed GraphQL endpoint, and it just works. Does that answer your question? Any other questions?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we've run out of time. Thank you very much.
Right.